Okay, there we go. Perfect. What's up, everybody? It's your man, Big Sto, and Nora. Of course, we're here for another episode of Office Hours, episode 49. It's a long ass title, too. I can't even remember, but
Basically, it's about who owes you support: fans, family, friends, all of the above, none of the above.
exactly. Exactly. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm actually really excited for this one. But of course, let us know, but down below, of course, how you feel about support and, whether or not you feel, because I feel like there's so many different directions to take this conversation. So whether you feel support, whether there have been times you felt you needed support and didn't get that, or times that you have felt the support, put that down in the comment section because we want to talk about the other side of that too. So yeah. So to start off, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Nora, my bad.
No, I was going to say, where do you want to start?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, like, starting off, because I think this is I think a subject for anybody that's doing, whether you're doing regular ass business or you're a creative. Support is important, and I don't think anybody's trying to like downplay that. But I guess I want to see, like, on your end, where do you feel that line, I guess, gets drawn of, okay, I need support, but maybe that's not where it's supposed to come from, or again, a billion different directions to go on with this conversation.
I mean, I think the key word, right, is owes. And the thing to remember is
Right.
nobody owes you support, right? You're not entitled to support. And so I think sometimes that's the thing that, sorry, is there an echo or am I just tripping?
I don't think there's an echo. Hopefully not.
Okay. But I think that's the thing sometimes where it's perfectly okay to want support. It's perfectly okay to ask for support. It's definitely, you should always offer support. But there's something about when artists expect support or feel like they're entitled to support that then can backfire. And so really thinking about, for me, this is a conversation about learning how to differentiate a friend from a fan, from a supporter, from a customer, from a ally, from a colleague, from and really understanding the ways that you can cultivate those different relationships so that you, I'm just going to throw this in the mix while we're talking. Shout out to
Oh, brother. Damn.
So I think that's the key, right? Is to differentiate between being owed something and then how do you cultivate something that you want, and what do you do when you're not getting the kind of support that you would like to have.
Absolutely, and I definitely agree with that. Like Nora said, the key word really is owes, because I think, like, all of us want to be supported in some way, shape, or form. There's nothing wrong with wanting that support. There's nothing wrong with at times not feeling supported. But I think when you get to the point of, okay, I expect or I'm owed this support because of X, Y, Z. And, depending on who you're asking, you might be like, and that's the other part, you might be asking the wrong people for support. I feel like that's something to touch on as well. So, once you start to get into, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm going to cut you.
No. I mean, yeah, I was pretty much done anyway.
It's also like, what does support mean? Right. Yeah. And sometimes we expect, so part of the way this conversation came up is a few years ago, I was at South by Southwest with a South African artist who is huge in South Africa. And we were at this event and they had like a later slot. And by the time this artist got on stage to perform, most people, it was like late last slot, most people had left. And so the artist was like, and I get it, right? Rightfully upset, and gave a half-assed performance and just kind of really half-assed it. And after the show was like, oh, so Nora, what'd you think? And I was like, yo, you cheated all those people who actually did stay for you. And, there's a little bit of, and so we had a conversation, and he was like, yeah, you're right, da, 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 da. But this idea that as an artist, people owe you things, and that support will always look like what you expect it to look like. So I think the key words in this conversation really is "oh" and really is support, because that can come in different ways. And so I think one of the things to talk about today maybe is understanding that there are different ways that people can support you. And so your family might play one role, your friends
Right.
might play one role, but if you're mad that your friends aren't buying your merch or signing up for your workshop or coming to your event, is that something feelings are all justified, but are those, how do I say this? Is that a fair expectation to have of your friends? Or do you redirect that to your customers? Do you redirect
Right.
that to your fans? Do you put that energy into building a base because you haven't really done that work and now you're mad that your friends aren't supporting you, right? So I think that's a sloppy way of me saying you really need to be clear about what you're expecting from who, and then making it easy for those people to give you the thing that you're asking for
Mm-hmm.
without
And
your ego getting in the way.
right, and that can be difficult. Like I've as an artist, like I've dealt with that like years ago and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it comes down to I think an important thing that you mentioned is focusing on the people that are paying attention. Um, you know, like I don't know, I don't always like saying this, but I feel like this is usually the case. Like the majority of your friends are usually not going to pick up what's going on until like unless like that connection's really there or they're really tapped in like that. They're usually not going to tune in until something bigger happens. And I think even with our like what me and Nora do here, like I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but like or actually no, me and Nora have both had conversations about like sometimes how on the family side there's not always that support, or you know, on the peer side, like me and Nora have a nice relationship, but I can at least say there's not a ton of peers that are constantly backing what we're doing and stuff like that. So we're not, and even sometimes the people that we're speaking to aren't always supporting. So it's like it's really about directing your attention to who is tapped in and who is paying attention, and put your energy there, because that's the other part. There's always going to be someone that's not paying attention, someone that's not supporting or whatever. So I think focusing on the people that are paying attention and making sure that you kind of understand, like you can't put your entire confidence in your career on the support of others.
Right.
And yeah, keep going. I was just blabbering, I guess.
What that also makes me think about, right, is like if my mom signs up for my workshop, my mom is not signing up for my workshop because I'm good at what I do or because I'm teaching things that like you can't really learn anywhere, whatever.
Right.
My mom is signing up for my workshop because she's my mom and she's trying to be supportive, right? If your friend buys your song, they're not buying your song because you're an incredibly talented artist. They're buying your song because they're your friend and they're loving on you. And so so I think that's an important distinction, right? Because that's awesome and you have that support, but also is that the support that you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same thing as doing the work of cultivating an audience and establishing your presence and building that rapport with your customers? And so sometimes we want family support or friend support or whatever because it runs the numbers up. But that's really not that different from bots, because they're not doing it for the reasons that you want support for, right? And so I think that's also like an important distinction, right? Is thinking about, is your construct of support really about the relationship you're building with people? Or is it about, this is going to run my numbers up, they're going to, press views or whatever? Yeah.
Word. So I think like
my brain is in like 12 different directions right now. So I think I'm a little scattered. That's all. Just needed to name it. Just needed to name anxiety today.
No worries at all. So the one thing I wanted to mention because I think this comes up a lot, like specifically like with artists that we work with, is and I don't like using the word entitlement, but it almost is where, like, I'm sure you've seen this as well, where artists, they've spent so long in the studio and doing mixes, sending them back and forth, and trying to get press, and trying to set up a tour, and trying to get shows, and trying to do this, and trying to get on playlists, and trying to do all this stuff, and then and put together an hour record or whatever and put it out, and they don't get what they believe, which I guess I always wonder what that actually looks like, but they don't get the numbers or the support that they believe they deserve. And so where do you when you're talking to an artist, I guess, like, how do you kind of rein in, I guess, those maybe not like unrealistic expectations, but sometimes right, like I feel like sometimes artists can be like, I put in all this work, so how come they're not listening?
Right. I think that's the part where you putting in work, that, like, what does that mean to your audience? Do I know that you put in work? Do I know why you put in that work? Did you put in that work and make it about me? Or did you put in that work and only focus on yourself the whole time? Because you have to give people a reason to care. And you have to give people a reason to become invested in you. And so I was just talking to a client right before this, and they haven't had internet access for like 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an artist in the US, right? We think of this as like stuff that happens elsewhere. This is an artist in the US who still has a landline, who hasn't had access to internet for 4 days, and is in the middle of putting out a project. And so if I don't know that this artist has gone through this hardship that we take for granted, I don't know what went into this project for me to be like, yo, you really went through some hurdles to put this in front of me. That changes the whole relationship, the whole narrative, because now I know that this is something that came out of hardship, that this is something that has a different context than if that project was just put in front of me and I don't know any of that backstory. And so that's part of why, Sto and I say this all the time, is you've got to give people the context. You have to give people the story. You have to show them all the behind the scenes process. You have to let them get to know you and who you are, because that's the thing that's going to make me care. And that's the thing that's going to make me want to support you. We support people we know. We support people we like. We support people we feel a connection with. And so when you do all that work and you do it secretly and you do it behind the scenes and I don't know about it, I can't support it because you haven't communicated that to me. And so that's the part where, we talked about this recently, and I say this all the time, like, for early career independent artists, your album rollout is an all year long, all the time process, because that's how you get me to care. That's how you get me to invest. That's how you get me to support you. And so I think that's the piece, is like, we know you work hard, right? Your fans know, but you have to really like spell it out for them. And then on top of that, you have to tell them how to support you, and you have to give them options, because not everyone's going to buy. It's like asking people to buy, that's a big ask. Asking people to watch or stream or play, that's a big ask. So can you give them multiple ways where they can engage and plug in with you, so that then you can build up to the support that you need? You start small, right? Sto and I, we started small. We started just by tweeting, and then tweeting went into Instagram, and Instagram then went into YouTube, and then YouTube went into workshops and like our joint consults, right? So you have to really hold people's hands so that it's easy for them to support you, but they understand what it is that they're supporting and why. And no one's ever supporting the music. They're supporting you. They're supporting your journey, your process, who you are. And so I think sometimes that like disconnect, so that you're talking about, comes from people not communicating any of that, only the music out, and then being like, well, how come no one cares? But they don't care because they don't know any of that backstory.
Exactly. And that, again, the context is so important, because it just provides framing. I feel like so many of you are out here just like, why aren't people supporting my big, like, life's work? but you also didn't tell anybody about it until a week before. You also didn't build a relationship beforehand, and you're also and again, we've said that this a lot today. Is like you are expecting people to hand you their hard-earned money for your work without building a relationship, without even telling them what they're buying. You're just saying like oh man, some of you will literally post on Twitter just like a link produced by so and so. I don't know what you want me to do with that. Like, because here's the thing, and we talk about this all the time as well. Is like there's a billion different things vying for our attention on the internet. You know, there's all these things and stuff like that that are also asking for our support. So I think that when you're trying to get someone to buy a product, and even otherwise, if you're expecting attention, if you're expecting plays, playlisting, whatever, there has to be some kind of relationship beforehand, whether you believe it or not. Like Nora said, we don't just support people because we think they're dope or that shit was fire. Like it's so much deeper than that. Again, stop and think of the people that you do follow, that you do support, and you do listen to. It's a lot more than just it's a banger. So we got to dig deeper.
I want to answer Sandroid's question.
Yeah, of course.
The other thing I just want to touch on is you also, one of the things that I think is a deterrent to supporting artists is also then when artists talk shit about their fans or complain.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot, especially back when like live shows were really happening and artists would be like, oh, y'all don't bring me any energy or you know, and like, it is your job as an artist to engage your audience. It is your job to earn their attention. It is your job to earn their respect. It is your job to earn their social capital. And so you have a choice where you can just shit on what's not happening, or you can focus and celebrate and uplift on what is happening. And this is also part of the perception. I don't know that no one's supporting you unless you tell me that no one is.
Exactly.
Right? Like you get to really frame that narrative. And so you can just as easily say thank you and appreciate and love on the people who are uplifting you. And it doesn't just have to be fans. It could be a colleague, a coworker, a peer, a friend. Like you can really put that energy out there and it's uplifting that. And the more you do that, the more you'll attract that. But if I see someone who's shitting on their fans, well, why would I want to enter that fan base? Why would I want to collaborate with that person? And so a part of that is also, and you can be frustrated, you're entitled to your feelings.
Exactly.
But it is also part of how that communicates something about how you are as an artist and the kind of relationship I can expect to build with you. Sandroid's asking, where do you draw the line as far as sharing your story versus maintaining privacy?
Right. So, I talk about this all the time with clients where it's like, yeah, your story is important. Like how you got to this point is important, as your story is unique and one of a kind, honestly. But I also make it a point to where you don't have to reveal every single thing that has happened. Because I talk to a lot of parents that are like, yeah, I don't really want my kids out there like that. Or yeah, I don't really want my like things that I've gone through to be out there like that. That's totally fair. And a lot of it is creating boundaries for yourself first. Because I think in some cases, regardless of the space that you're in, I feel like sometimes there's a pressure, I think, to reveal everything and talk about everything that we've been through and stuff like that. And I think in some cases, some people aren't comfortable or ready to do that yet. So I think first you set those boundaries with yourself. What do you want to keep private? You're allowed to have that privacy. But at the same time, again, if you're trying to connect with others, there's still a way to kind of talk about your experience and what you've been through without really sharing every excruciating detail and putting yourself in a not a vulnerable position, but like, oh, damn, I'm losing the word, but
it is vulnerable. It is.
Yeah,
vulnerable.
Right.
And I think to some degree, it's actually irresponsible, right? If you're putting stuff out there that you're not comfortable with or that you haven't fully figured out on your own, then you're putting that burden on your audience or your customers or your fans to take care of you. And that's not fair because that's not the job of your fans. So one, when you're thinking about what is the stuff you want to put out there, you want to make sure you're putting things out there that you're good enough with, that if people say things or people push back or people criticize, you're taken care of. And this comes up a lot when I talk to artists about sharing their mental health struggles.
Yep.
You want to be mindful of like sharing mental health stuff when you're actively in it versus, right, which is tricky and sometimes really vulnerable and can be dangerous, versus when you're past it and then can talk about it from a position of separation, because now you're storytelling, right? You don't want to, so there is a difference between reliving something versus telling the story of something. And if you find yourself reliving and then you're getting triggered or there's wounds coming up, it's perfectly okay to take that back and keep it for yourself. But
Exactly.
if you retell it and you feel like you're in control, then that's perfectly good. The thing is, when you're telling your story, so one is your personal story versus your story as an artist, right? Like who is, as an artist, there is a degree, as much as we're authentic, of this character that you're playing. And so what's the context? What's the story? What's the journey that this song or this project or this album or whatever has gone through? That's the stuff you want to share. You don't have to talk about your relationships. You don't have to talk about your whatever it is to keep private, as Sto said. You can absolutely do that. You just want to make sure that your audience still gets a sense of who you are and what makes you different. So music and what else? But you can set those limits. And y'all, you can change your mind.
Exactly.
You can decide
exactly.
to talk about something and then be like, no. Or you can decide no and then start to open up and talk about it, right? So this isn't like a one and done. It's over time how you open up. But you don't have to put everything out there. The only thing I would say is I think a lot of y'all like this mysterious vibe and then say, well, like no one sees me, no one knows, but you haven't given them anything.
But you haven't said nothing.
So I worked with an artist recently, and I don't know how many emails I went back and forth to be like, can you send me a photo that has your face on it so we can promote you? And the artist didn't want to show their face. And I was like, well,
I don't know what you want me to do.
Going to, like, I don't know how to help you. But they thought it was like a whole vibe, and it absolutely backfired. So, you know, things like that you can kind of make decisions about. So I think that's the balance between sharing your story and maintaining privacy. And sometimes it's a little trial and error, and you're like, ooh, shouldn't have shared that.
Exactly. That's the thing I want to make sure that we stress is that this isn't like, we're not saying, all right, you have to open up. And once you're open up and you get to that level, you have to stay at that level or else. Like, no, like a lot of this stuff is, especially now in this weird day and age that we're in, some of this is kind of new to us. And even in terms of expressing some of the things that we've been through and some of the new things that we've been through. So and again, I'll put myself in the situation. Like there's some things, even with this, that like, you know, are still affecting me and stuff like that. But, and I'm willing to admit that there are times where I haven't felt supported, but you know, I'm not going to go in and just be like, okay, here's what it is. Like, I can't believe it. It was 5 years ago, and this woman, she stole this cookie from me. And so, you know, it doesn't have to be excruciating, like detail or whatever. Share as much as you feel comfortable with sharing. Don't let people pressure you into doing it. You know, again, you can still do for yourself while sharing as well.
So can we talk about, because I know this is something you and I have both talked about, the role or lack thereof of family support?
Right. Yeah, it's a tough one because it's even, you know, I feel like I think with and especially as minorities, I think we whether it's how we were brought up.
We're not minorities. We're systemically oppressed and we have been minoritized.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
There's nothing minor about any of us. And
right,
I think that language fucks with our head.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm just saying in that how we grew up, whether it's like, you know, I know in my household it was, you know, make sure you got that career and make sure that, you're stable for when I'm gone and stuff like that. So now I know for me personally, I'm like, okay, I feel like I have accomplished some of those things. Where that support at? And it doesn't always show up in the way that I would like it to show up, or at all sometimes. So I think for a lot of us, and I know for me, I had to kind of personally get to a point where it's like, okay, I can't kind of lock my self-worth into my family's approval of what I'm doing. And that's something I kind of just have gotten used to, or like kind of settled with over the last like year or two. Because it really was like, I really want to impress my mom. I really want to impress my mom. And you don't always see it like the way that it comes, the way that you'd like to see it, I guess. And so that can kind of leave you feeling disappointed or whatever. And so kind of getting to a point where it's like, okay, I'm still worth something, even though so-and-so doesn't see it. And it's not just family. It's friends, peers, bosses, whoever. And you just remain focused on the people that are in your corner, that do care about you. Because if you're so focused, and I feel like some people watching this like are so focused on trying to garner support from certain people, that you're completely ignoring all the people that are like, yo, we're actually actively cheering for you. We want to see you win, but you're so concerned with person over there who, you know, what, and again, I'm not saying that this is necessarily family, but in some cases, sometimes they ain't even gonna, they're not gonna be, you could win $1 million today and they still wouldn't care. So focus on the people that are in your corner, that do care, because they're there. They really are. I think it just takes some time to really, again, get out of our ego and open our eyes a bit, because it may not be complex or whatever, but there are people supporting us.
Yeah, it makes me think of one, like how important, if any kind of entrepreneurial creative work, I've talked about this so much, you're putting yourself out there. So that self-work of valuing yourself regardless of what other people say really
Bingo.
is foundational. Like,
yep.
Knowing that your locus of control is internal, you've anchored yourself so that which doesn't mean you're not going to take feedback, but really knowing that you're inherently valuable versus your value being defined by how many streams you have, how many followers you have, how many likes you got. If this person whose attention you want is like co-signing you or not. And I think part of this conversation of support, we look so externally, but are you supporting yourself? Are you showing up for yourself? Are you doing the things for yourself? And I think that's really critical. And support is, are you taking time? Are you investing in yourself? Are you learning the things? Are you doing the hard things? Are you saying yes to taking risks? All of that kind of stuff.
And that's not easy, people. No. That's not easy.
It's scary. And it's scary, especially if you come from, like, I know for me as an immigrant, as a Middle Eastern woman, I'm supposed to be a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Why? Because that means stability. So when my mom looked at me a few years ago, I had just finished this like huge project with UNICEF. And my mom was like, but you're a failure, because I didn't have a PhD. I wasn't married. I didn't have all those things. It really, and it was like a whole thing, right? She really was like, you are a failure. I really had to understand that this wasn't about me actually being a failure.
Exactly.
It was about her projecting her worldview of what success looked like. And also recognizing her options were limited based on her social location and her cultural upbringing and her being an immigrant and what she had to give up. So there's something for a lot of us where I think we have the space to like live our dreams that our parents or our family never had the privilege to do. And sometimes people feel some kind of way about it, and they project their own fears and their own anxieties. And so I don't know that there's, and every family is different, and all of our upbringings and family trauma and like there's so many things that go into it. But I just want to hold space for that in this conversation today, is that sometimes it's hard to be the one that's doing something different than what the family expects from you. And so that doesn't, just because they're not supporting it, doesn't mean that they're not supporting it in the way that, because they're not supporting it in the way that you want to see support, doesn't mean that they're not supporting it in the best way that they can. And also, it's not a make or break, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I just want to hold space for that. It's because I don't know, it's hurtful. It sucks. We want our families to support us. And some of us don't have those relationships with our families. And so, you know, that's part of it, just as much as if we don't have enough fans as we want, or don't get the whatever, right? Like, that's a real part of this work. And I don't think we ever talk about that really.
Right. And the only thing I'm going to throw in there is honestly, like the self-worth part and self-work part is not easy. Listen, I can say, like, even sometimes on my best day, like, my self-worth is probably anywhere between like a C- and like a C. So I'm still working on it, like, actively. And so even us, like, being on here is like kind of an exercise in that. So we're not here to say our self-worth is perfect and yours is not, so therefore listen to, like, no, like, both of us are putting in that work as well and trying to navigate all this crazy shit just like you are. Just know that you are worth something regardless of who is on your side and who isn't. And I promise, if you take a second to look around, there's at least one person that's in your corner actively cheering for you. And maybe consider reaching out and saying thank you to that person, because again, like, you never know who's sticking around. It's always back and forth. But to sum up, hopefully after all this, we understand that nobody owes us support, but it's okay to go and look towards the people that are supporting you. It's okay to look for that. It's okay to need that, because like, who on earth wants to be like, I don't want to feel supported? Like, no one wants.
Time out.
Go ahead.
Not to cut you off, but I think that's so important, because there's also this narrative of, I did it by myself, I don't need anyone. And that is such a lie. It's such a lie. It's such a lie. It's such a lie. And it's a lie designed to get us to work extra hard without relying on community, and to think that, like, we're somehow not good enough if we don't. Nobody becomes successful on their own. No, so you don't have to do it by yourself. There's no shame in wanting or needing community or support or help. And the trick is just to learn how to ask for it. Like, no one's going to read your mind. No one's going to read
ever. That's not going to happen.
So let me reach out and support Sto. Sto has to ask, hey, this is what I need. Or I have to ask, this is what I want. Who can offer this to me? And so there's no shame.
And it's okay. That's not easy either. Because a lot of us were brought up to, like, don't ask for support. Don't ask for help. Like, that shows that you're weak. Like, don't do that. We don't do that no more, because it's impossible to do anything out here by yourself. You will drive yourself insane. It is okay to ask and want and need support. Just make sure you're looking for it in the right places, and make sure you check yourself before, you're like, well, so-and-so isn't supporting me. Well, maybe they're not the right person to be supporting us. Maybe we got to look back and look around and actually, find the people that are looking for what we're bringing to the table. I feel like that's important too.
Right. And then the third piece of that is, then how are you giving back? Right.
Exactly.
How are you showing up? And without, right, because it's not a transactional thing. So I'm going to support my community, and maybe they'll reciprocate, maybe they won't. But that's a lot of folks ask, take, but are you also replenishing? And so that's the part that makes entrepreneurship and music business especially communal work. We give and we take, and that's the core of peace. So I know we've kind of been all over the place with this episode, so if you have things that are unclear or questions or kind of things that came up, drop them in the chat. Or in the comments below. We'll always come back and answer your questions. Make sure you do help us out. This is one way that you can support Sto and I, is by hitting the like, by subscribing to the channel, and sharing this episode. Share it on Twitter, share it on your social medias, put it in your newsletter, because the more people see this, the more we can create these kind of paradigm or cultural shifts in the music business, where we're all kind of talking the same language. And also, take care of yourselves today. Drink some water, stretch, take a break. this is some heavy stuff, and it's not always easy to talk about.
Yeah, definitely definitely let us know. Again, times you felt supported, times you didn't feel supported. And again, I really just want to stress, like, you all are worth something regardless of who decides to support you. Like, I think that's so important. Like, I get it. There's always people we want to get attention from and stuff like that. But, you know, regardless of where that ends up going, like, you are still worth something regardless of that. So make sure you remember that. Drink some water. Get a goddamn website. I'm not even going to say newsletter anymore because I'm tired of this slander. If I see team newsletter one more time, I'm going to throw my laptop out the window. Team website, team drink water, get some rest. We'll be back in 2 weeks, apparently, with episode friggin' 50. So that's going to be something else. And I'm going to end this before more propaganda happens. Oh, my goodness. Be safe. Get some rest.